Good evening, everyone. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner for the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves CEWL, and you can find out everything about our center right here on this website, CEWL.us, the CEWL.us. Everything that we do there, all of our live streams, all of our information, all the services we provide to public school educators and schools in South Carolina. It's all on that website. So check it out. We do free professional learning for schools and districts, or if you have a conference that is attended by public school teachers in South Carolina, we can do free professional learning for your conference or your school, your district. All you have to do is there's a button on there that says just request free professional learning. You'll fill out a contact form and we'll get back in touch with you and set that up. I want to just, before we get started tonight, remind you that we do have a couple of spaces left in our Educator Wellness Retreat. We have about 2 spaces in our June retreat and 2, maybe 1 or 2 in the July retreat. And if you're interested in learning more about that retreat, it's only for public school educators in South Carolina. It's CEWL.us/retreat. And that, when we say educator, we mean anybody who works in a public school in South Carolina. Bus drivers, cafeteria workers, classroom teachers, administrators, guidance, or school counselors, I should say. And anybody who works in the building is eligible to attend that retreat. So I want to encourage you, that should be sold out pretty soon. And I also want to remind you that we are brought to you by the South Carolina Education Association and NEA. We operate under a grant from the National Education Association, and we work closely with the state affiliate, the SCEA. And if you are interested in joining the SCEA, you can do it right here on this link. And the great thing about joining right now is there are no dues until September. So you can join in April and see what it's like and not pay any dues until September. It's an amazing time. If you've been thinking about joining, now is the time definitely to join. So give us a shot, learn more about our movement, and you can do that at jointhescea.org. Well, tonight we have a guest who I think is an incredible communicator. I happened to see her videos on TikTok. I was scrolling through TikTok like I do sometimes, and happened to see some of the videos that she was doing and thought they were really incredible, really important information that she's sharing. And she's doing a great service really for public education in South Carolina by advocating for a lot of the things that we've been advocating for at the SCEA. Her name is Tayler Simon. She's the owner of Liberation is Lit, a bookstore that aims to spark collective action for liberation and community building among readers and book lovers by promoting stories from intersectional experiences. Through Liberation is Lit, she also provides self-publishing book coaching to writers from historically marginalized identities. She has self-published 3 books: Phases, Poems, Writing Our Truths, a guide to self-publishing for BIPOC writers, and Love and Other Forms of Heartbreak. Tayler has previously worked in the interpersonal violence prevention field for 8 years. She is passionate about promoting social liberation and bringing an anti-oppression lens to all industries, institutions, and fields, especially through the power of transformative stories. So please welcome Tayler Simon. How are you tonight, Tayler?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So other than I've had this cold going on for a couple of weeks, and I'm kind of over the worst parts of it. But please forgive me if I'm sniffling a little bit. I think part of it also is all this pollen out there is also messing with my allergies. So
Yeah, I've been rubbing my eyes and I'm just like, oh gosh, usually pollen doesn't affect me that bad, but I don't know what it is about this super pollen out here, but my eyes are itching and my throat's itching. So I definitely understand.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll power through it together. You heard me read your bio. Is there anything that you'd like to share with folks who might be watching that wasn't included in the bio?
No, pretty comprehensive about me, unless you want to know like my social security number and my astrology sign, which is Cancer, by the way. I won't share my social security, but yeah, that's basically me.
Okay, so let's start with, how did you get connected with the idea of liberation and intersectionality, and in particular with books. How did that journey start for you?
Yes, so I've always been a reader. I remember reading books before I could even read books. I would have my little Disney audiobooks on my cassette tapes and listen to the stories and turn the page when it was time to turn the page. And books have always been just a part of my life. And so has writing. And I wanted to start getting serious about writing around 2019. So I was like, well, every writer needs a blog. And so I was asking a friend, what should I start a blog about? And I had recently fallen back in love with reading. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start a book blog. And it became more than just, okay, this is whether or not I liked it or not. It became, this is what I've learned from reading a story from a different community. This is what I've learned about a particular issue. And this is how this story inspired me to learn more about issues and get activated and share these things with other people. So I started that blog, and I also, while working with survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, I saw the power of the Me Too movement, the power that stories had to bring community together, but also change the narrative about how we talked about something such as sexual assault. And those two things kind of inspired my advocacy work. And then as I was doing more with the book blog and eventually starting the bookstore, the book censorship fight just started to blow up. And I was like, well, I am self employed now. I have the time. Why not just do what I can to protect stories? Because Liberation is Lit particularly highlights the stories of Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ plus, and disabled writers in order to foster connection and empathy and just bring in the humanity from these huge controversial issues. How can we bring back the humanity? And so I kind of see Liberation is Lit as kind of a container of all the work I do to really promote change in my community through the power stories.
That's great. I think one of the when you're talking, I'm thinking about like how do we cultivate empathy? How do we cultivate understanding and empathy? And for me, it has been through film, through books, through documentaries, because I don't, sometimes we grow up in a certain environment in a certain culture, and we don't necessarily get exposed to a wide variety of views. And so we can only have empathy for things that we understand. And
Mhm.
if we're not reading stories or watching film or hearing about the stories of how other people perceive life and how things are landing on them, it's very difficult to just kind of like spontaneously develop empathy. Like you may feel like I kind of care about other people or whatever, but for me it was like learning about the civil rights movement. It was like hearing the stories, watching documentaries, watching a film
Mhm.
like Mississippi Burning, or those are the stories that help me cultivate this capacity to see beyond what my own experience. And it sounds to me like that's what you're advocating for, not only for the marginalized people, but also for people who aren't marginalized, so that
Mhm.
they have a greater understanding of what folks are going through. Talk about the importance of ensuring that books that represent a, a diverse set of experiences are protected.
Yes, so there is a quote by a librarian that I love to quote all the time, Rudine Sims Bishop. She has this whole essay around books being mirrors for us to see ourselves. And that's why it's super important for the kids who are Black and brown and all sorts of ethnicities and the kids with disabilities and the queer kids, the trans kids, they have representation to see themselves normalized, but also imagine a future where there's so many different possibilities and not just the same possibilities. So that mirror aspect is really important. But also, she says that books are like windows and sliding doors for us to put ourselves into the lives of other people and learn about them. One of my favorite memoirs is by the author of I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, and it's called Crying in the Bathroom. And by that title alone, and me being a Cancer son, like I'm just like, oh yeah, that book is for me. And as I'm reading it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like she is living my life. But at the same time, I am not Mexican American. I'm not the daughter of immigrants. I didn't grow up in Chicago. Like, I don't have a family. So there's so many identities that I don't relate to Erica L. Sanchez on. But at the same time, like, I still connect to those aspects that I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is my life. And that is the power of stories where somebody could have a completely different life than you, but you find those ways, those common points of humanity. And that's how you build empathy. When you see somebody go through the same things that make you laugh, the same things that make you cry, you're more likely to feel that connection and that empathy. And that's again why I love stories about messy Black women. And I feel like people are so hard on those stories like Queenie or Luster, where there's a messy Black woman protagonist, like making a lot of mistakes and getting things wrong and trying to figure out her life. And people are just like, well, why didn't she just do this? Or she's just making a bunch of stupid mistakes. Like they're so hard on Black women in general that they are harsh on even a fictional character. And I love them because they're stories that humanize. Like Queenie, for example, almost everything Queenie did was because of a trauma response. And when people are just like, I don't know why she acted the way she did, I'm like, did you not read what happened in the first chapter? And so when we're able to kind of have those instances where we can see the full picture of somebody's experiences, we can understand why they make the choices that they do, understand how they find ways for people to love them and be in community with people in ways that we might not necessarily agree with. We can build that humanity because we're coming from a place of understanding, and we see things that are illustrated better through storytelling versus something just straight out of a textbook about this is how this culture acts and values and things like that. When you see the story aspect, you can see like those connections about this is how somebody loves, this is how somebody expresses joy, things like that.
When you have, I mean, we've seen over the past couple of years this assault on free speech, and this is like these attempts to and successful attempts here in South Carolina to ban certain books. And I know recently there was a group of 10 books that more books they were trying to ban, and you hear about that, and it seems to be escalating. What do you think is really behind that push to remove these books?
I do think it is a targeted attempt to erase some communities, because when we erase that representation, when we erase these stories, then we can say these people don't exist, and it's easier for us to dehumanize them. I think of books like Tango and Tango Makes Three, which is about a couple of penguins. I think it's like two male penguins and they have a baby. And that's like one of the most banned books across the country. And it's not about the thing itself, it's supposed to be normalizing the thing. And those are the books I feel like get targeted the most, where the people who hold identities that are deemed other, we don't want to normalize those stories. We want to keep seeing them as other. And so this effort that's hidden behind these punchlines like parents' rights and things like that. Well, what about the kids? Why do we want to take away their choice to learn about people who are different than them? Take away their ability to be curious and to come to conclusions on their own because of course, a 12-year-old can't come to a conclusion on their own. It's got to be a teacher or a librarian pushing an agenda on them. But we don't. I feel like we don't give kids or young people enough credit because they are younger human beings, so they may not have like the frontal cortex all the way developed, but they still can make a lot of decisions on their own. And taking away these books that are targeted for very specific identities, or here in South Carolina, any book with sexual materials, the problem with that argument is that sexual abuse and cautionary tales around abuse and trafficking and relationship violence among young people, those are getting swept up into this strict regulation. And there's also flawed systems within like the administration process of book censorship too in South Carolina, but that's another conversation. But these topics are getting swept under that no sexual materials allowed at all, and books that have really important conversations about finding support after abuse, feeling isolated after being sexually assaulted, all of those stories and experiences where people can find hope in the end are being taken away as well. So that is the danger I find in that, but also some of these other like LGBTQ plus, there could be no sex at all in the book, but it's still their identity is sexualized. So that gets swept under there as well. So all of these like things that on the surface is like, how can you argue that you don't want pornography in schools? I agree, but what you are saying is pornography, I don't agree with. And I think that is the issue that we're seeing nowadays, is that we don't want to normalize things we don't want to continue to talk about.
Right, right. And this idea of parental rights has always been a hollow argument because at this point, all parents, I don't know if everybody realizes this, but all parents have total control over the books that their children read right now. Like we didn't need to do anything legislatively to change that. Like any parent can call the school and say, don't let my kid check out these books, or before my child checks out a book, I need approval. And the school librarians will set a system up like that. So parents already have rights, already have control.
Mhm.
What banning books does is it actually takes the right away from me. And if I want my daughter to access a book like one of the ones you're discussing, now that book is no longer available to my child unless I go purchase it. And that's, to me, that's taking away my rights, and like you said, also my daughter's rights, and that's a problem. But I think this goes to, and you can feel free to push back on this or refine this idea, but it feels to me like what's going on is you have this sort of Christian nationalism that is taking root, where there are people who won't come out and say directly that they want theocracy, but they support all of the legislation that sort of looks like that says we have a particular moral and worldview informed by our religious beliefs, which is their right. But then they want to come into the public sphere, into the public schools, and it's funny how they accuse us of indoctrinating. They want to indoctrinate. They want their value system imposed on the rest of us because they feel like they're saving us. There's this sort of evangelical mindset that, you know, all these kids and all these people need to be saved. And if we allow these books to continue, that's going to pull them away from being saved into a life of sin or whatever. And I think this is the problem, is in a society that's supposed to be free, and there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. We're now in South Carolina and many places in the country starting to blur those lines by making these kind of decisions based on people's personal religious views, and because they happen to be the majority, there's now not a respect for the minority or for people who don't necessarily adopt those views, or who have the same views but also have this value of freedom and respecting the, you know, separation of church and state.
Yes, and the only pushback I would give to that is that I don't think they are the majority, like, legislatively and like in power, but as far as like citizens in the state, I think they're a very vocal, well-resourced, well-organized minority that can get a lot done, because the rest of us are out here, like, how many people can take off work every month to go sit in a 2-hour state school board meeting? Or like, I've been in the state house for the past 2 days. Who can take off work to show up and be vocal about serving your constituents in the way they want to be served when they have to go to work, they have to pick up kids? All of this keeps us from participating fully in the civics process. And even the fact that they've taken civics out of, well, I'm not sure if they've taken it completely, but I only had a semester of government and I didn't learn anything in that class in high school. So people are demystified by, or the process needs to be demystified about how to show up. But at the same time, too, to your point about the Christian nationalism, there are people, it's not just the parents groups that are showing up to the school board meetings or the state house meetings, it's also strategic people being run for office. Our South Carolina, I don't know if I can talk about our superintendent, but
You can say it, there's no,
okay.
we're not censoring.
Okay. She was recently in a conversation with Representative or Senator Tim Scott, and saying that she would love for us to essentially go back to one-room schoolhouses and have strong Christian values a part of the curriculum. And like, she believes like these types of micro schools are the future of education, and the fact that she decided to purchase PragerU and form that partnership, and that is a lot of Christian indoctrination materials. And it is very, I don't know, I don't understand the level of mental gymnastics that it takes to address this level of hypocrisy of what's indoctrination, what is not, protecting some people's freedoms, but imposing your rights onto other people and your opinions and your beliefs onto other people. Like, sometimes it's baffling to me, but I do agree that overall there is this dangerous wave of really strong Christian nationalism. And I specifically refer to as Christian nationalism because it's totally separate from the original, I don't know, teachings of Christianity. And it's become a way to have social control. And for ultimate social control, you have to start with the education system and controlling what narratives students are exposed to, as well as taking away from their ability to think critically, to question the sources of information that they get, instead of it just being spoon fed to them and just taking everything as fact. Just those skills are needed over all age
Yeah.
groups.
Yeah, and they're moving away from teaching novels and teaching reading from a more technical standpoint or from a nonfiction, which nonfiction's great, but like we talked about earlier, this is the power of story. Is connecting with a character or connecting with a set of circumstances, and then laying that on to your own personal experience, and then learning, sort of growing and stretching yourself as a person and your perspective on how, like we talked about, how life is for other people that have a different lived experience. I think it's like their interpretation of indoctrination is, if you create a safe space and accept people for who they are without trying to mold them into something you want, that's somehow indoctrination, which, like you said, is there's a cognitive dissonance that I experience when I hear them talking about indoctrination, and then you look at what policies they support. They're actually trying to implement indoctrination, and it is people who respect diversity and respect that, like, a student comes in, and whether they're straight or gay, black or white, whatever, like, I'm going to love and care for them and try to help them reach the greatest potential, and also not judge, and also not, prevent them from reading stories about people who may be like them or may be different from them. Like, it's like you said, it's about control. This is all about all of these policies are really about control. And I think there's probably two things. I think there is this legitimate, like, people have this moral worldview and believe they're saving people. I do think there is that, and, like, trying to give those people the benefit of the doubt. But there also is, I think, this more cynical thing where they use that religious or moral piece as a wedge issue to get people to create division so that more people can vote against their own economic interests. And that's the only way you can get people to vote against their economic interests, is to convince them that CRT is being taught in public schools and it's bad, or that DEI, they won't even name it, but DEI is some boogeyman that to get rid of and to be scared of, and that they're coming after white people, and they're coming after you next, and they're coming after Christians, and there's this persecution complex that they try to create, and this fear that they try to gin up, and then people won't vote. They'll vote for politicians who will go and then give tax breaks to billionaires and give them sweetheart deals to move their businesses into the state. Sorry, I went off on a rant there, but talk about the importance of intersectionality and understanding that, because I think sometimes what happens is sometimes we get caught up in our own personal struggle, and we don't see how all struggles are connected like that. A lot of it is economic, and I love what Fred Hampton talked about in this area. For those who haven't explored Fred Hampton's videos, he really gets, to me, is a really powerful person in terms of that intersectional piece. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I think especially nowadays, people think intersectionality means you have to keep up with all the issues, do all of the things, be a part of all of the movements. And to me, intersectionality is it's less about trying to know all of the struggles intimately versus, like, being aware that because of your specific intersections, you see the world differently. And so, how can we leverage these intersection points to build collaboration? So, that's kind of how I personally use intersectionality in my work. And that's kind of how I see it, even though originally it was more so to illustrate those compounding effects of oppression. Like, as a queer Black woman, I'm not just experiencing, like, queer issues, not just experiencing Black issues, not just experiencing issues for women. Like, I'm experiencing them all at different points and different pressures. And I think is a great starting point for just curiosity about how do the issues that affect your personal life connect you with someone else, because you may connect to people at certain intersections but not all intersections. And so for me it's really important to add that lens, because oftentimes we don't know who we're leaving behind because we just don't think about it. And there's often times where I don't think about a lot of things. For example, like I am terrible with putting uh image descriptions on my social media posts. And I know that's not me intentionally being ableist or intentionally leaving people behind, but that's something that I often just forget because I'm a person who doesn't need image descriptions. So intersectionality is just, I kind of see it as a way to quality check like what you're doing, like just thinking about, okay, who may I be leaving behind because I don't have to think about certain issues. Who can I bring to the table? Because oftentimes the most, I say the most marginalized, not in the way to try to do oppression Olympics where um which I kind of see this happening in the anti DEI bill that's going on right now in the state house. Unfortunately, representation on these education committees in the House in general is dominated by Black men. So they're obviously going to speak from their perspective of being Black, and not realizing that DEI helps more than just Black people, but Black men specifically. So thinking about just having that as your quality check of, okay, what identity don't I hold? Might I want to be more mindful that is included in my work when I just may not think about it? So that's how I kind of use intersectionality as a tool.
I appreciate that. I watched the movie Wicked a couple of months ago, and in the movie, for those who haven't watched it, Glinda, the Good Witch or whatever, she essentially sets herself up as this ally, but it seems like it's a lot of it's performative and sort of like, I just want to be seen. I'm a good person. And I think that if I'm being really honest with myself, sometimes it's like, I'll display a rainbow flag, or I'll wear a Black Lives Matter shirt or fly that flag outside my house. And sometimes I feel like a little bit like Glenda there. Not that I'm intentionally saying, "Hey, I hope people see that and come up and pat me on the back and say, good job, you're a really good ally." Like, but I think there's probably I fear that sometimes my allyship is sometimes too performative, or at least too reliant on performance, and
Mhm.
not enough on an actual meaningful engagement in these issues. Can you help folks like me who, like, our intention is sincere to be good allies, but sometimes other than the performative stuff, we struggle with knowing is precisely how best to help, and we are also, there's a little bit of fear of that, like if I step in too much, then I'm like centering myself, or so there's like all these calculations going on. Like, what to you does good allyship look like?
I feel like to me it starts with listening. Instead of us coming in and pretending like we know how to fix a problem of a community that we're not a part of. It goes back to communication and conversation and listening more than you talk. And I feel like allies do or should be doing more work with the people that they kind of align with in privilege versus the people that they're serving. Not in a way of like, don't engage with Black people if you're white, but just recognizing where you take up space you should be taking up space with the people you align with in privilege, and taking more of a listening and learning role from the people who you're trying to be an accomplice with in liberation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good point. I appreciate that. I one of the places that I've tried to do that is in social media, which is really exhausting. I recently posted something about Elon Musk and him controlling over $300 billion in wealth, and that I felt like in a country where kids are going to bed hungry, we have homeless veterans, we have people without adequate health care, people of I think it's like 50,000 people die due to being uninsured each year. That seems like a lot of money for one person to have. And then you just have someone, people call me a communist and a socialist, and which I kind of am, but like just like a lot of vitriol and like, you're stupid, you don't understand how that works, and it can be exhausting trying to push back on that. And I know that sounds really privileged to say I'm exhausted, but I think it's hard for me in the social media space. I think it's hard to do that work, but I think you do it particularly well. And I'd like you to talk to folks who would like to use social media, but maybe they don't know where to start, or how they should use it. Like, what would be your advice to somebody? Because I think you do it so well. Like, what would be your advice to somebody who wants to speak out on social media, but kind of doesn't know where to begin or how to manage that? How do you manage it?
Something I learned very quickly from Threads is, because I never had my Twitter moment, but I learned from the Twitter veterans who came to Threads that your space is your space. And people who, I think the reason why I am so vocal on social media is because I haven't been truly attacked by trolls yet. Um, but I will say that I have gotten some issues for like some Threads posts that people were just being nasty towards me personally,
Mhm.
and I block them, because at the end of the day, if for example, there's my liberation is lit stuff, and then there's my personal stuff. And while I keep the two separate, my core values personally are the core values of my business. And I don't post anything in general that is directly attacking a person,
Right.
or and if I am like criticizing a person, I'm criticizing their behavior and their choices, and not um, trying to attack their humanity. I may call them a clown, because I feel like clown is a good word to be like, it's not dehumanizing someone. And if they're being silly behavior, it's an accurate statement. So like, I try to critique people by their actions and their behaviors. And if I do something personal, I might call them a clown, something that doesn't dehumanize them. And I am also open to feedback. I'm not just saying, oh, my opinion is fact and 100% right. So definitely protecting your online space, whether it's an organization you represent, or your personal page, having clear expectations with your community that you will not tolerate hateful language, you'll not tolerate direct personal attacks, and just make it the expectation that if people engage in that way, that they're going to get blocked. And there's kind of like it's not a hard and fast rule for me, but I have kind of guidelines in my head whether or not to engage with someone online. If I feel like they're coming from a place of genuine curiosity and seeking to understand, then I might engage. But if they are just trying to start something or stir the pot, then I don't bother to even respond. And if they're posting something directly hateful, for example, on my YouTube, I interviewed a trans author about a book about trans young people's experiences, and that was the only place where I got like transphobic comments on my stuff, and I deleted them. So I draw the line at hate comments and hate speech, but if there's like a disrespectful question or something, I might leave the question there, but I won't respond, and I might limit comments. So protect your space and have those boundaries.
I think all of that is really, really good advice. And I think especially in, this is something that happens a lot is people will move away from like, let's in a curious way discuss this idea and an open mind with an open mind. And I'm going to be listen to you, and I'm going to hear what you're saying and respond to it. And then I want to make sure you're reading what I'm saying, and then you respond. We don't have to agree. But once it starts getting into this condescending kind of insulting kind of language, like if you're too stupid to understand this, that to me,
Yes.
like that's when I just am like, I'm not going to tolerate that. And it's immediate. It's a block. The problem is that even in those instances where people are curious, I rarely have ever seen anybody go, you know what, I've thought about it and you're right. Like, and I think I've over time, maybe my opinions have evolved if I hear certain things and I think through them. But I don't. Yeah, I do believe that like the only way to overcome bad ideas is with better ideas. Is to expose people to better ideas, and realizing that throughout my life, and I'm sure still now, held bad ideas. I still hold bad ideas, and the only way they're going to change is for me to hear or listen or read or be exposed to something that is opposing what my current schema. So that and I also think sometimes we get frustrated, like we just want to give up because it's not an immediate change. But what we may not see is that person then is going to be exposed to other ideas 7 or 8 times down the road. And then over time, maybe they do change, and maybe they are voting for the right people, and maybe they are thinking about things differently. We just may not see it in the immediate sort of interaction that we're having with those people, but that maybe we sort of planted the seed that will germinate later. I want to say thank you for what you're doing. Your voice is really powerful, and you're doing a great job, a great service for South Carolina, for educators and students. And I want to appreciate you and thank you for your time tonight. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to share with folks?
The only thing I want to add is that I really like what you said about exposing people to better ideas, because I feel like a lot of times we get overwhelmed in this work because we feel like we got to stop all the bad things. But sometimes, like, our role is to provide alternatives and leaning into our strengths about how we can provide those alternatives. So, yesterday at the school board meeting, they paused the vote on banning the last 10 books statewide. And even though that wasn't we're voting to keep these on the shelves, we take that as a win. So being grateful for the little wins that we can get, and just being open and imaginative to creating something new. And I know educators are so good at that. So thank you to everybody watching the live stream who is an educator for the work that you do to plant those seeds. And if you're not doing the work of imagining a better future, you're definitely raising the generation that's going to imagine a better future.
And I think people count on us to get discouraged and to just give up and then come. I've been playing around with this idea that we're all have this sort of collective dissociation going on, that we just like a lot of us are just like, I don't even want to look at the news. I don't want to pay attention to anything. I don't even want to go on Facebook anymore or social media. And I just want to pretend like it's not happening. But I think that's kind of the whole point. And they call it flooding the zone with all this stuff that you can't keep up with everything, and you just get frustrated and kind of give up. But I think where we have the bandwidth to continue to push good ideas and continue to advocate that's our responsibility to future generations. And you do it really well. I want to share your website, liberationislit.com. Is that's that
Yes.
right there? Okay.
Yes.
Folks can find out more about Tayler at liberationislit.com, and they can find you on social media. Do you have a handle that you can share with folks?
Yeah, so at Liberation is Lit on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Threads too, but I'm not as consistent on there. But that's where you can find me and all the work that I'm doing.
Great. Well, Tayler, thanks again. And we'll have to have another conversation again soon, and look forward to continuing to see your work all throughout social media. Thank you, Tayler.
Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody, that's Tayler Simon from Liberation is Lit. If you want to learn more about her work, just go right here, liberationislit.com. And she said that her handle is Liberation is Lit on most of the socials out there. I do want to just share a couple of things before we head out. If you are not familiar with our Praxis resources, we just launched this a couple of weeks ago. We are in partnership with NEA and study.com. We have resources for future educators who need to pass the Praxis. Maybe you're struggling with that, or maybe you're scared you're going to struggle. We have free resources on this website at cool.us/Praxis. If you are an early career educator in your first 5 or 6 years, and you are looking for some support, and maybe you don't feel comfortable going to someone in your school about the issue, you can go to one of our coaches for free at cool.us/coaching. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, we have these 3 incredible educators, Angie Brush, Stephanie Johnson, and Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder. They are online. They will provide you that free, confidential, unbiased support Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 8 o'clock. You just go to cool.us/coaching. You get put into one of the rooms, one of the breakout rooms, and you can meet with them and talk with them and share your experiences and questions, and they will give you that feedback that you need. As I mentioned earlier, before we started, there are a couple of spaces left for our educator wellness retreats. This is a picture from last year's retreat. It is a secular science-based trauma-sensitive retreat. It is specifically for educators. It was created by educators, myself and Yelena Popovich, who is a school counselor, a school psychologist. And there are 2 retreats. There's one in June, the 25th through the 27th, and one July 23rd through 25th in Old Fort, North Carolina. They have recovered from Helene. It is beautiful. I mean, absolutely gorgeous up there. There are beautiful cabins on the stream. It's quiet, it's secluded, it's wonderful, it's safe. We do mindfulness practices, we do yoga, we do some mindful walks. We have really engaging and deep discussions together, and everything's gentle and easy, and you get to choose what you want to do, and you can bring a friend if you want to. So it's a really great experience and very affordable. $150 for members of the SCEA and $250 for non-members, and that includes your meals, your lodging, a book, and all the sessions. The only thing it doesn't include is your travel to and from the retreat. So check that out, cool.us/retreat. And I also want to preview our next live stream with Bill Mayer. He is, I used to teach at Carolina Forest with him. He's an incredible coach, an incredible administrator, an incredible educator. He wrote a book called Are You a Kid Connector Today? And he talks about the importance of building relationships with young people if we want them to reach the greatest potential. He's going to come on and share his inspiring ideas with us 2 weeks from today. I believe that's the 16th from 7 to 8 o'clock right here. So you can mark your calendars and join us for that conversation. And all of our conversations, you can comment in the sections and we can bring them on. So we'd like it to be as interactive as possible. I want to thank again Tayler Simon for joining us tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on April 16th with Bill Mayer. And until then, survive the pollen and have a wonderful week.
Together we learn, together we grow, together we heal, together we flow. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school.